Hey everyone, it's a beautiful night in the transverse. Welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. I hope everybody's doing great out there. I'm very excited about tonight. Our guest tonight is Lex. Lex is originally from Long Island, New York. Now he resides in the city. He works on solutions for topics such as youth experiencing homelessness, trans rights, public health, policing of youth in NYC, community building, and intentional healing through art. Please welcome to the show, Lex. Hey, Lex, how are you doing tonight?
Hello, hey everyone. Thank you so much for having me on Transverse.
It's wonderful to have you here. And just a quick note to everybody out there, special thanks go to you for filling in last minute. We had a cancellation and you're willing to come in, and we always appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone in the chat. Welcome in. Thank you all for being here. If you are a fan of the show, if you've been here for a long time, you know that just recently we changed the format just slightly. Please ask your questions throughout the show. Type at the transverse, and I will be able to pull them out. The mods will grab them and throw them into Discord for me to grab. But we won't be answering those questions until the second half of the show. So keep them coming in, but after the break, we will get to that. For the first part, we'll just bound through Lex's story, and we'll get going. You're getting, just real quick, you're getting comments on your sweet tattoos already.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I actually got a new one. Maybe I'll show y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll
Yeah,
go into your tattoos in depth after the break and all the other fun stuff that you do.
love that.
All right, let's start with the easy one. First off, how do you identify?
So as we had so humbly spoken of, it's ebbing and flowing. Right now, I do identify as a man of trans experience and embracing two spirit, embracing what it means to be all.
Nice. And what are your preferred pronouns?
So I use he, him, and king.
Mm-hmm. And what does the king signify for you? Why is that part of your pronouns?
Yeah, so I also want to just apologize real quick because I am in an Airbnb, so you may hear random people for a second. And that's okay. But the king is really important and significant for me. Not in a, I feel like it can come off as like an ego thing, but really it's an affirmation of people in my lineage, black people, indigenous people, an affirmation of royalty, of inheritance, of belongingness, of recognizing each other and our worth. Because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we have been in a world that has sort of like misconstrued this. And so I feel it's important to address people with esteem, with
Mm-hmm.
love and care.
And on that note, do you like to talk about your heritage? What about that is significant and important to you?
Yeah, so I come from Dominican, Cuban, and Costa Rican lineages. And what that means is really mixed and all traced back to a lot of deep, wonderful indigenous and African roots. And so I identify with that and I like to honor that. And just also like accept and people as their whole selves and whatever divine is within them, regardless of lineage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jumping into your story, I like to start with my favorite question, the fun one.
Yeah.
How did you choose your name?
Yeah. So this one is interesting. Many people I find go on this really interesting journey, and mine is really not super interesting in that way. I was like, y'all get the point. Okay, I need y'all to get the point. So it was converted from my given name.
Okay.
And so I just like my middle name became Alexander. And then from that, I don't really care about sharing the name, but and then from that I added Rey, which is actually my mom's her family's name is Reyes, which means
Oh.
kings.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So so I put Rey Rey in the middle, um, and it's a significance of paying homage to that lineage and also an affirmation of king.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wonderful. When did you first realize you were trans and
Yeah.
come to identify that?
Yeah. So this is interesting because I feel I always want to bring up like my inner child and like that recognition before there was anything to gravitate to or
Mm-hmm.
any proof necessarily, because I think it's so important to acknowledge and affirm those parts and iterations of ourselves. However, the story that I got to share with you, the truth, was that I was like leaving from one household to another, and I was not very much accepted on my maternal side. And so I went and I left my home at like I think yeah 15, and I was going to Florida to be with my dad and my stepmom and that family. And so, in the process of that, they have a really good childhood friend who is very much proud lesbian, you know, and I always knew that she was community, but it was never spoken aloud necessarily. We always vibed, and so she became my chaperone to Florida. And so before I left, I actually, so it's so interesting going from all this rejection to all of this, all of a sudden acceptance, and then like experiencing my first pride in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was 15, right? And we got into the club, you know, and I literally got in with her ID, and you know, and it was amazing. And there was this moment where that song Bulletproof, like this time baby I'll be right bulletproof, and in that song, through the flashing lights and all the dancing, I caught a glimpse of this person. I can't say identity, but it's someone who was mass presenting, and it looked like what seemed to be scars, you know, or faded scars on their chest. And I had no idea what, you know, surgery. I knew that there things existed, um,
Mm-hmm.
because of like Jerry Springer as a child, as we
Mm-hmm.
spoke of. That was my first iteration, but
Yeah.
that was my first time seeing someone dancing and being full and with people, and I didn't need any explanation. I saw that person and I knew exactly what that was and what was going on. And then after that I couldn't get out of my mind. Like I nothing else mattered to me. I actually had gotten a blaring headache, because I was so in my thought
Oh wow.
of like what could this mean, you know, like there's I don't have any evidence, but I know that that person is someone like me, right? And so that was my first time kind of like sitting in the fullness of whatever transness could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You finally see something reflected back to you that is something that resonates and is like, oh, these things are possible, right?
Yeah, and the fact that it was just such a it was a celebratory moment, you know,
Mm.
like I was so used to the media projecting this warped image of transness, and like that we're like freaks and like, you know, like Ace Ventura and all this stuff. um the 90s were tough for, you know, and so I as a child I watched a lot of that stuff, and so having that moment of seeing someone in community was an affirmation, and just sort of like, hey, like it doesn't have to be like that, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Yeah.
So then now you've got this example finally, a positive example, and
Mm,
basically I get what you're seeing there is you're seeing
yeah.
somebody that's out and open. He's shirtless. He's having a good time. He seems to be accepted in this community.
Yeah.
How did you then take that and apply that to you and come to terms and accept yourself that this is a possibility for you?
Yeah, so it took a minute. It took a minute. I was someone who I needed to gravitate to some sort of truth, because I had gone through a lot of violence and trauma as a child, and I really wanted to make sure that this transition was mine and not a reflection or iteration of what I had experienced, because it was so important to me to resonate with this truth and it be mine, you know, and unique outside of any pain. And so I took a very unique route, which a lot of people would like dread the idea of a therapist or whatever. I think the times are changing, but I decided to seek out, you know, a man of trans experience who was also a therapist. And
Mhm.
he really just um, affirmed me and allowed room for me to have conversations with like what my child was, like what who I was,
Mhm.
right? And how like I didn't outwardly talk about being trans, but that there were moments and like gestures and songs and the way I sang it that were an affirmation of who I was. Um, yeah.
Mm. And at that time, did you have any kind of role model or confidant other than the family friend? Were you still in touch with her, or was there somebody else that you were looking to as you were seeing this therapist?
Yeah. So she was really like someone that helped me go from one place to the next. But in community, like I was so young, like I don't even know. I want to say like 13 or something when there was Yahoo groups, you know,
Hmm.
and Yahoo groups, they had like messengers for this is dated, so y'all, you know, this is how we was doing it. Okay, feel bad for us. No, I'm just playing. But no, but you know, I mean, we've been here in history, so I'm sure we were selling telegrams and all that shit. But you know, smoke signals and all that. But this was Yahoo groups, and so we had like a very coded group, and it was for men of trans experience, Black men of trans experience, and I remember that was also a lot because, um, you know, I was coming into my identity as far as like my roots and my lineage, and I was like, oh my goodness, because I'm of lighter tone, like what if, you know, they don't accept me? So
Hmm.
being finally accepted into this group was like an affirmation on all levels, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
immediately I had cousins, I had, you know, brothers, I had, you know, uncles, I had fathers, you know, and these people are still people that I confide in today, you know, and it's gonna be, you know, over a decade. Yeah,
That's wonderful that you're able to
yeah,
find
hmm,
acceptance at all levels of your identity in one place.
yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
magical.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it was a lot of growth, you know, because even in our communities, there's been, you know, ebbs and flows, tension and release of like what identity can look like, what masculinity can look like. And so I'm like really proud to say that like we've evolved a lot from understanding masculinity or whatever we think men to be to show up a certain way,
Hmm.
and that is fluid like many things.
Well, and that's what I liked, I think, best about our pre interview yesterday was that
Yeah.
you have figured a way to take your identity and make it yours. Like,
Hmm.
not falling into any specific strict definitions. You've found a way to make your identity your own.
Yeah, and it's I feel so important to say that this has come from a lot of deep-seated shame, you know, like that this wasn't an overnight, that this has been chipping away at a performance, at how I perform masculinity to protect who was inside,
Hmm.
which was all valid because you know sometimes we survive until we thrive until we can live, right? And so now that I'm living and I'm present, you know, I'm feeling grounded. I realized that I needed to do that. I needed to feel these levels of affirmation to then be able to flip the script, you know,
Yeah.
regardless if I medically transitioned or not, you know.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So then let's move to the next step. How did you come out to the people around you, your family, and things like that?
Yeah.
What was your process there?
Yeah, so like with friends it was different. Like it was interesting because I had a lot of cis women. I didn't know what to call them cis then, but
Mm.
that were respectful friends that were like we're like, oh, that makes sense. But then when it came to my family, I have to say I was like a little indignant, but a little also just very proud of what was happening, and so I felt the need to protect, and so like I was like, I think I came close to a year. No, it was like a few months. It was a few months on TV, like three months, and my voice had dropped and I couldn't hide it anymore.
Mm.
um and so I was like, oh, I gotta say something, right? Because I didn't feel like I needed to owe anyone any explanations. And so I invited all these pertinent family members to a Facebook message, and I came out to them there, and I was like, hey, this is what it is. This is who I am. You know, I don't know. Talk amongst yourselves. And then I left the message, and you know, hindsight 2020, I feel like I'm very proud of my younger self for having so much respect for what was in the process, what was in the making, you know.
Mhm.
um and looking forward to that, and that growth. uh and so yeah, I left the chat, and you know, people hit me up afterwards, was like, so, you know, like, we may need a little bit more than that. And I was like, I just felt like, right, I'm still up for edit, right? Like, I'm
Mhm.
still defining who that is. You know, the book hasn't even been published yet, and you're asking me for a hard copy, and that doesn't exist. And it's not fair because it doesn't exist in general, you
Mhm.
know, not just for trans people, but for all people. We're all transitioning and evolving. And so I feel like it wasn't fair to have to be so fixed in my
Mhm.
identity or who I was, because I felt like I couldn't claim anything just yet. It's still evolving.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that was my way, and I'm thankful for how I did it then,
Mhm.
and now, yeah.
I think that's just such an important point, and it's kind of surprising that I feel like we haven't really gotten to something like that yet in this show. Is
Yeah,
you know you're still so much of a work in progress at that point, and sitting down and trying
oh
to
my
have
god,
these deep conversations,
yeah,
trying to define yourself to these other people and explain it when you don't know yourself, just puts you in a really tough position. So I appreciate
yeah.
that sentiment.
Thank you,
Hmm.
thank you. I appreciate that.
What were the other aspects where you needed to come out? Were you working at that time? Was there another couple of conversations you needed to have?
Oh yeah, it was wild because I was in Florida, so it really played a role and an impact on, like, employment. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I first started medically, I was in um when I first started, I was in Macy's credit customer service. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was answering the phones, and so my voice began to drop. And, you know, they were like, what's going on? Right? Like, I needed to have a high voice, I guess, to perform customer service. And so, yeah, it was wild, because I wasn't going to do that. And I remember having a few people on the phone. Like, I remember there was this lady, and she was such a joy because she had a really deep voice. And she was like, "Oh wow," she's like, you're a guy, and you sound like a girl, and I'm a woman, and I sound like a man." And that was something that I was like, "See, they get it. They get it. We're different." But
Mm-hmm.
long story short, I was laid off of that job, and it was a temp job. I had the opportunity to um, stay on, and I did an amazing job. And what was told to me is that I didn't want to know why I was being laid off, and that's something that happened a lot in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
with those jobs. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So what was the resolution of that? Were you able to find employment after that and find it while also
yeah.
expressing your true identity?
Yeah, it was difficult because I felt like there was a lot of compromise, like my mom would say things like, "Why can't you just be Ellen DeGeneres?" And I'm like, "That's not how that works." Like I can't just be somebody to be palatable, to be to exist, right? And so I did a lot of odd jobs. I did like inventory. It seemed like I was often put in the back or put in the stock room.
Wow.
And that was difficult, I guess, to come to the realization as to why, because the roles that I applied for were not those roles, but that's where I wound up.
Wow.
Um, so that was difficult. And I also worked like at Home Depot for a stint in Tampa, Florida, and the HR guy told me not to use the restroom because he didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable with me. So he told me to hold it and to not use it. And then I spoke to the store manager because I thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And she said, "That's not at all what we stand for." And I remember that. She said, "That's not at all what we stand for. You use what makes you feel comfortable." And that was something that was amazing that I didn't know, right? And a
Finally
lot
having
of
an
like,
advocate. Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of that was like having no idea what an advocate was necessarily, but knowing that it felt like a volcano in my stomach and I had to like just stand up for myself. Because I didn't want also a young person to come in and have to deal with that. And like, I'm strong, and a lot of like my advocacy has been like, I may be strong enough to handle this, but maybe somebody maybe or not strong enough, but like I may be able to do this right now, but somebody else, this may take them out, right?
Yeah.
And that's like I've held space for that and understanding that, like it's just beautiful, that part of community. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's wonderful that
Yeah.
at the right time you're able to find that advocate and yeah,
Mm.
find that strength in yourself, and then now you're
Yeah.
able to pass that on to others. Like you said, that may not have that inherently or may not have the
Yeah.
surrounding, the support around them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Now, you said that you were in a sort of a split family at that point.
Hmm.
How was the level of acceptance there, and was the family acceptance from the previous location, did that matter
Hmm.
to you? Did that affect you?
Yeah, it interrupted my ability to receive myself fully and understand that I was accepted in ways that I didn't know in other parts of my family. So like I had my stepmother and her family, I had my dad and his family, I had my, you know, my biological mother and her family, and then all the families attached to those. It's a lot.
Hmm.
And my maternal side, just was not really there. But the interesting thing is that now I think about like my relationship with my abuela, and she had always been really supportive. I shared with you that I was like 8 years old and she took me to an Old Navy, and she said, no me importa de dónde. I don't care from where. Si la ropa viene de los niños o de las niñas, if it's girls or boys, I just want you to be comfortable. Pick whatever clothes you feel. And so naturally I picked, boy clothes, and she saw me, smiling, and she was just happy, and I didn't understand. I was just happy. And now when I look back on that, I realized that was her way of like, like testing, like, oh, like, is this part of who you are, right?
Okay, yeah.
And later on, I told you of another truth was where, I was like an adolescence, I think 14 or 13, and I was taking time away from my mom's household again, and we were both like night owls, and I wasn't sleeping. And so she came into my room and sat at the foot of the bed, and she looked at me and she's like, te quise, te quiero, y siempre te va a querer, like, I've wanted you, I want you, and I'll always want you. I'll always love you, you know? And
Hmm.
and she still says that. Like I call her sometimes and that's like how she answers the phone, and if I did not dare to dare on that love and reach out to her, if I would have listened to people telling me that her heart wasn't strong enough to deal with me, like I would have not had that connection. But because I follow my intuition, I've been able to have that. And for her to tell me, lo que tú eres es eterno, what you are is eternity, what you are, for her to say something like that has changed so much in my life. And I just feel like sharing that all the time, because I think it's important for us to know. And that, like, my grandmother is not just my grandmother, but through that experience, I'm able to hold and be a container for other people in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned community. Now you're back up in New York, having gone
Hmm.
through those struggles in Florida. How did
Yeah.
you how did you choose and make that decision? And what led you back up to New York?
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? So I had gone through a bouts of mental health issues because of the trauma that I had faced. And so I had realized that, like, though I love my dad and my stepmom, that I was allowing myself to be coddled, because I had never experienced freedom in the way that I had experienced it. So I didn't really know the levels. And so, because I didn't necessarily have, like, you know, very, like, I don't consider myself someone. I've been parented by many people,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if I've experienced parenting.
Okay.
I've been guided, and there's things that I've received, but there's been a lot of mixed messages that I've had to decipher on my own, or with myself. And and so with that, um, I hold space uh for the fact that, like, it's just a growing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you came out and started to find yourself, were there people around you that supported you that surprised you? Some support that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, yeah. There's been, like, random people, like, even just, like, religious people that were, like, either, like, a lover at the time, their parents or whatever, that they got to know me. Like, I remember dating this girl, and her mom was very religious, but after, like, just spending time with me and seeing, like, how her like, the babies have always loved me. And so, like, how the baby was with me, she was like, "Oh, my daughter needs to marry you," and I was like, "I don't know about that," but it was it. And parents have always, like, I've always gravitated to older individuals in general, but um I've always had this rapport with children and parents and stuff, and animals. So it's so interesting that I feel like people don't know, and I think ignorance is from fear,
Mm-hmm.
and often leads to anger. However, if you can trust yourself and love yourself at your highest, I it can aid to how and model how somebody can love and regard you.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that that has been definitely replayed in the relationships that I've had with people, because I have cis friends, cis guy friends, I have cis girlfriends, I have all kinds of agender, non-gender, bigender, like, all kinds of people in my life. And I think the common thread is just love and respect, and not wanting to change someone,
Mm-hmm.
um, and coming back to that, recentering that reality.
Yeah, I think it comes from an empathy for other people, an
Yes,
ability to
yeah,
kind of understand to understand maybe that if you don't understand where they're coming from, that that it's from a real place and honoring
yeah,
that.
yeah, and that we all just are.
Hmm. So, kind of an ethereal question, a difficult
Mm,
one to wrap your brain around
yeah,
sometimes. What does transition look like for you? You've mentioned
yeah,
testosterone and some
yeah.
surgeries and things like that, but just in
Hmm.
general, what does transition look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's shifted over time. At the
Hmm.
beginning, physically transitioning was so important, and I, like, went 2 months in and doing the whole video clip thing, and it's totally valid. I understand why it's valid. but I had to put a pause on that because I realized that I was having a lot of expectation as to how my body should show up. And I started embracing impermanence. I even shaved my head and was like, I need to understand that this is temporary. And if I can't love myself now, then how will I love what I'm creating?
Mm,
And that creation, and I shared this with you, is like, I feel trans people are miraculous in that way because we fight for what is not tangible, what we cannot see, and I feel like, is that not godly, right? Is that not like an iteration of God likeness? And so over the years, physically transitioning has not been the most important, but it was crucial at a point in time. And so like I've had like the double mastectomy, and like I take tea, and I'm also like really big into herbs, and I'm thinking about like also just taking natural supplements, and weaning myself. I've been in the process of weaning myself off of testosterone, which, who knows? I just feel like it's individual,
mhm,
and I feel like the social part of my transitioning has been super important and critical, um, to to facilitating how I've been able to interact with the physical transition. So at this point in time, like, I do not feel the need to have any other surgeries.
mhm,
However, like, if science is like, poof, I can do this. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm,
that's it, honestly, because what, I'm very much in the present, and living life in this moment. And I think it's really important for folks to go get your surge if you can, if you need, right? If you need, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way, but for me, coming from the eye, at this point in time, I don't feel the need to do anything else, because I'm at peace,
yeah.
and I don't want to take any more time away from all that is right now. So, mm,
Mhm. I want to go back to that point that you
mm,
made that is another really important one, that what we're striving for in being trans, in
mm-hmm,
re-identifying ourselves, is something that's intangible and something that again, going
mm-hmm,
back to that initial conversation, we don't
yeah,
know what it's going to be. We don't know what it's going to turn out to be like.
mm,
And I like the tie-in that you make to religion, where it's,
mm,
or godliness, sorry, not religion,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
like a connection to
I know,
God, because it's
yeah,
such a leap of faith, where
yeah,
you have to start
yeah,
your journey not having any idea of the end. You've got
yeah.
no clue. And so there's a lot of faith that's tied into that. Such a
It's
great
the
point.
intangible,
Mhm,
right? It's the intangible, and I've recently used this analogy, and I like it, so I'm gonna use it again. Is like when you put a seed into soil, it's always dark. It's always dark, and you water it, and you don't necessarily know, but you can feel something growing when you're
mhm,
doing it, and so I feel us in that. I
mhm,
feel transness in nature in that way, that it's often dark, and you don't really know what's happening,
mhm,
until something comes to the surface, and you're like, oh, what is that? You might be overly critical, you might be whatever, but it's something, it's creation. And I think that's really beautiful in the way that I'm being able to receive this now.
mhm.
That if I could like reach into my younger self, which I've been doing this through this inner child work, oh Lord, but if I could reach back, to that physical, right, form of myself, and just be like, you are okay, right? um right, like, mwah, you're okay, put your back down. That I would be doing that. I would be definitely doing that. Like, just calm down, you all right,
Mhm. Yeah.
you're gonna have a beard one day. Look. Right?
It's gonna work out for you. It's
um
all good.
yeah,
Well, I
thank
love that additional analogy that you dropped in there of the seed,
you.
and then you pour the water on it. I was thinking, yeah, it's pretty dark and damp. just it's
I'm
just
drowning. I think
yeah,
I'm drowning,
exactly.
but the sun is gonna come out, and it's
Hmm.
gonna it's gonna come together. Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, you're gonna find it, that true you is gonna poke out of that surface and
Uh,
find the sunlight. This
yeah.
is
Mm,
just a
Mhm.
Solid metaphor factory tonight. I love this.
Yes, thank you. There's the poet.
So, what were some of the key fears that you've run up against in your transition, and how have you overcome those?
Oh yes, the fear of being in the middle. That thing of like being indiscernible, right? Like with
Mm-hmm.
my gender presentation, because I realized I had centered a cisness or like the binary. And I'll use another thing that I say is the binary is built to break. The binary has been, I don't know if I could say this, pimped for pimping's sake, right? So
Wow.
the binary, for example, has been so commodified that you kind of lose the fact that everyone is performing gender to some extent, right? And we've learned this through cis people, right? And so, in many ways, there is a beauty in femininity and masculinity and the iterations of these things and all. And then it's also like you just are, you just is, and that's it, right? And so I've been embracing
Mm-hmm.
that more. Hmm.
Yeah, and the problem with that is, yeah, as it's commoditized, it
Yeah.
splits out and becomes here's the ideal. It's not beautiful to be a man or a woman. It's beautiful to be a specific type, and here are the things
Yes.
that you need to buy in
Glorified.
order to be that.
Yes, and you see it in all the commercials. You see it. It's like built to make you feel bad. You know, I don't watch cable TV, but whenever I watch it, I just my mouth is all the way open because I'm just like, this is what people watch. I'm like, why do you watch this to literally feel like crap about
Mhm.
yourself? You know, and I realized that it's not us. Like there is an obsession of what the perfect this and the perfect that. And guess what? None of it is perfect, right? It's whatever you perceive perfection to be.
Mhm.
And that's really my biggest takeaway is like our perception is our own, and so like decentering that idea of like needing to show up as a man or as a this or as a that to be valid. That's what was terrifying for me is like, oh my goodness, I'm terrified of like, right, like this person coming down and being like, your gender is invalid, right?
Mhm.
And actually, that happened many times in different ways. And guess what? It didn't matter because I'm still me. You know me. Um, and when it comes to safety, sometimes I had to tell myself that my life is worth more than my pride, and that's a tough break. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So, looking again, kind of stepping back a little bit from it, how far
Mhm.
along in your process would you say you are?
I don't think I'm anywhere and like I'm everywhere and nowhere at this. I mean, like I know this is like not really a stern, I guess, answer, but I feel like I'm where I need to be right now,
Mhm.
and if that changes or ebbs and flows in the future, like I'm cool with it, and I'm cool if it doesn't. So like I'm there and I'm really excited about that, because I feel like there's so much room for my brain to do other things, that it's like I got to tell myself to take naps like we were talking about earlier. I'm very proud to be taking naps these days. Yeah.
So, what do you do in your life to find validity in your identity these days?
um Validity, oh my goodness, my community, the community, being in nature, spoken word music, healing through meditation, and doing policy work, all these things that are just different ways for me for self love and community love. That's where I find my sacred space.
Hmm. That's beautiful. It's external for you in helping others. That's how you show
Hmm.
up. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
How do you feel transitioning has affected your mental health?
Woo. Okay. For a minute, it was like, oh Lord, we don't know. We're doing something, right? Something's happening. It's alive. It's alive. I went through that. I went through that, and now, yeah, like, it's just sort of, I'm here,
Mhm.
like I'm grounded. I'm feeling my body. For a long time, I don't know if I was here. I don't know if I was feeling things. And I
Yeah.
think that transition, no, I know that transition, physical, social, spiritual, however you want to say it, has gifted me the presence of being alive. I don't feel that I was alive before I stepped into my truth.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Wow. Now that you've got to this level, are there things that still trip you up? Do you find yourself dysphoric at
Uh-huh.
times?
Oh yeah, all the time. This mask thing, like in the beginning, I have pretty eyes, and that's just is what it is. You can have pretty eyes, whoever the hell you are, but wearing masks in New York, like I've had like the guys on the street, like like ma'am, and I'm like, I don't got money for you, like and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, brother, and it trips me up because I'm like, did I really care? No, no, I just was sassy because this random person just decided because I had pretty eyes they could assess my whole gender, and thus the whole thing is also reminding myself that everybody goes through that. That even as a person of trans experience, I misgender cis people and other people sometimes, not on purpose, because
Mhm.
sometimes it is what it is, and you make a mistake, and you hope not to, but it happens, and so there's room for that too. That I'm just like, we ain't the end all be all, y'all. Okay, we don't have to take that all on. We are all understanding what the hell each other is.
Yeah. Another great
Mhm,
point.
yeah.
What are some of the biggest hurdles you've had in your transition, and how have you managed to overcome those?
Yeah, fear,
Mhm.
fear. Before, I felt like I could see only maybe 4 inches in front of my face in
Mhm.
that radius. And now it's like I got 360 and it's panoramic up in this piece. Like I see everything. I'm feeling it all. The colors are brighter. The smells are more pungent. I feel like I have my senses. I feel like I've been able to live, and not just survive, which survival is always a part of it, in this experience, and I don't want to uh, water that down, but it's something to be said about just being able to be in a room and not trying to wish myself out of existence,
Mhm.
because I did a lot of that, until I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Mhm.
Mm.
So, what if you had to pick one thing? What would you say is your favorite part of your journey?
Oh, us. Us, community, my chosen family, being able to be present, being able to see my life as a miracle, that this didn't happen to me, it happened for me. Um, to understand that I am a bridge and an island, um and that that everybody is welcome, and that, as long as there's respect, like I love how people say, yeah, you could call me whatever as long as it's respectful, right? That's what I'm feeling these days, is that, like, I'm chill, like, and I find that even just the cis people or those that are not trans, that they even can vibrate in their truth by seeing us just be all that we are.
Mhm.
So it's a give and take.
Another amazing sentiment. This didn't happen to me, it happened for me. Just
Hmm.
a beautiful thing to think about your transition.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful note to leave the main part of the set of
Mm.
questions here. And as we wrap it up, the big one that we like to ask everybody, what advice do you have for young or closeted trans and non-binary people out there?
Oh, I would say some words of encouragement, not advice, but some words of encouragement. I would say, give yourself room, you know, imagine yourself as that seed, and that all the energy, all the life, all the creativity, all that you could ever imagine is already there. It's already inside of that seed, and all the nourishment is already inside of that seed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the soil you choose to plant yourself in, All right, the sun that you choose to receive, how many times you choose to water yourself, who you let water you, that is totally up to you, and you have autonomy no matter what situation you're in, right? Know that how you choose to love yourself in your mind and your sacred space is the most important, and no one can take that away from you, even if you have to fake it until you make it for right now.
Mm, very beautiful. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for that. All right. Well,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much for being here on the show, Lex. I really appreciated, like I said, you
Pleasure.
filling in, but coming in and answering all the questions and just sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me and just creating this platform. I'm excited to see all the things that y'all are able to manifest, and definitely keep tabs, let
Mhm.
me know what's going on. I would love to share with the young people in my world, and just my community on this way,
Yeah.
because I think it's important for us to connect more than ever. Yeah.
Hmm.